Well, what we have is something that was flatlined. The city received roughly $11 million a year each year as its share of the sales tax revenue. One could argue that in the early years that probably was more than the city warranted, but clearly $11 million is far less than the city now warrants. And what Jason's chart shows is that the county tax revenue has grown dramatically in the same period of time, when at the same time the city was receiving a set amount. In the new negotiation, the city will receive slightly more, some $500,000 to $700,000 a year more. But the fact is, it's a bad deal. And it's a bad deal because last year when I was running for mayor, I accused the city council of being puppets to the then acting mayor, now mayor, Gary McCarthy. They took offense at that, and then they went along with everything he said. In this particular year, we have a slightly different situation. We have on the city council Vince Riggi, who was elected with Alliance Party support, and he is certainly asking the right questions, and he's going forward in a strong way. At times he's joined by Carl Erickson, but the other members of the city council march in lockstep to the mayor's drum. And whereas he's their puppet master, he is really the puppet for the county attorney who controls the party system in the county. And it was the mayor negotiating with the county attorney over what the share of the sales tax revenue would go to the city. It couldn't be an arm's length transaction, and as a result, in my judgment, the city was, again, shortchanged. And this shortchanged result is one that's now been locked in for the next 8 years. Bad decision, bad result, and it's a result of one-party rule. We ought to understand that any dollar that the city gets is a dollar that the county does not get. And so, since our tax rates in the city, our tax bill, are part of an overall bill that includes also the county tax and the school tax, we have 3 taxes that are being paid. And as a result, the question is, where do these dollars come from, and how does it affect people in the city? The truth of the matter is that for every dollar that the city gets is one less dollar for the county. So that if city taxes were to go down, county taxes would go up. And we as city taxpayers would still have to pay that county tax. The difference is there's 66,000 people in the city. There are 157,000 people in the county. So it'd be a question of spreading the pain of increased taxes over a larger number of people, and it would therefore benefit people in the city more to have greater dollars coming in from that sales tax agreement. Well, the city of Schenectady has 2 problems. One, the taxes are simply too high. I pay, and I assume it's the same for everyone, roughly 4.5% of assessed value in my cumulative taxes. And that would clearly go down if the city got, for instance, a larger share of the county sales tax agreement. But the thing that we have to bear in mind, we have a city that was built for a population of 90,000 people. And we have today some 66,000 people living in the city. So we have an excess of housing, and that excess of housing means, by definition, you're going to be driving prices down. So the price is being driven down by 2 things. One, the taxes are too high, and 2, there are too many properties. And so long as those 2 things exist, it's a downward spiral. We do live in houses that are clearly better homes than one could get for the same price elsewhere. But we pay so much in taxes that people are unable to afford to stay in their homes. When I went around campaigning last year, I was running into people who said, I'm moving to North Carolina. I'm moving to Tennessee. I will move anywhere as soon as I can get rid of my house. In some cases, they're walking away. In other cases, they're taking lowered prices. So people are able to purchase property that might be better than they could otherwise afford to get in another area. But then once they're in, they can't afford to stay in the homes because the taxes keep going up. Right? One of the reasons that I put together the Alliance Party, which was an alliance of Democrats, Republicans, and independents or blanks like me, was that I felt that we do not benefit as a community by one-party rule. I would not care if it were all Republicans. It is now basically all Democrats with Vince as the exception. You need competition. You need people to question what's being brought before them. The absolutely ridiculous thing that happens at the city council is that the mayor comes in with something, he gets his puppets to vote on it that evening. No thoughtful person can possibly react to something without having an opportunity to look at it and to talk to people in the community. So long as you have one-party rule, you will continuously have this puppet-like approach to government. And the only people who benefit, are those very few in the power structure of that party. Not the taxpayers, not the residents, no one in the community but that small handful of people. So whenever a person goes into a voting booth, if he or she has a choice among people, they should consider seriously bringing somebody in who's not part of the party establishment. Well, I would say, when you say they perhaps would vote differently, what happened when they went into executive session to discuss whether they should have more time? The people who, in some cases, raised the issue came back out and voted to adopt the agreement that evening.
Right.
It's one-party rule. It's puppet-like procedures on their part. You can't get people who are dependent on the party to be elected to vote against what the party structure says it wants. The only way you get different results is to get different people from different parties with different perspectives.
And that's why you started the Alliance Party.
That's why I started the Alliance Party.
And I think that, you know, having a second voice, you know, one political party rule is obviously a big problem. And having a second voice, even if they were in the existing party and they wanted to vote differently or diverge off the party line, they don't make it easy for a member of the council by voting on in the same night and rushing
Correct.
it through. You know, make it practically impossible. And so that's part of the freedom of speech platform that we're talking about here at SAC TV, and saying, you know, we really need to be able to get that information out there. We need to be able to help inform the public. And I think a more informed and public would be able to support the ability to have more of a discussion and not force things through in a puppet-like manner. Meaning, maybe the strings are attached and someone's running the show, as you say. Maybe the people have to help cut those strings
Right.
to some extent.
There's nothing wrong with puppets in a theater. But in politics, in this city, with people's livelihood and resources and homes on the line, there's a lot wrong with it. Important thing for people to understand is that if you have competing views, you end up with more thoughtful decisions because people will challenge that which is being brought before them. But if everyone is of the same party and you have a person telling them the way they're going to vote, they may raise some questions, but if you look at the way they voted, they go almost always in lockstep with what, in this case, the mayor wants. It's bad politics, it's bad government, it's not something that benefits anyone but those very few people in the power structure. And again, this is not Democrat versus Republican or an independent person like myself. What it is simply seeking to get the best government by having people with a wide range of views people who will challenge that which is being brought before them rather than puppet-like going along with it. You have one-party rule now throughout the county in terms of local offices. You have 13 of the 15 people in the county legislature are one party, and you have now 6 or 7 people in the city council. It's bad. It makes no sense if the objective is to give people that which is best for them, to give them choices on which to vote, to give them the opportunity to express opinions different from the person who is pulling the strings of the politicians. In the case of the city, I believe that's the mayor pulling the strings of the council, with a very clear exception of Vince Riggi and on occasion Carl Erickson. In the case of the county, it is the county attorney, Chris Gardner, pulling the mayor's strings. He is the puppet to the county attorney because the county attorney controls the party in the county. Impossible for the city to get an arrangement in a sales tax negotiation when the parties doing the negotiation are the party boss and his puppet, the mayor.
This past year.
The way the agreement's structured, the city gets a small increase, but it's basically locked in at that 11.7 number.
See, and that to me would mean that there's little or no distribution that could go back, let's say, into the rest of the city.
Right, but that's looking at it purely from the tax point of view. The question is also, what do you do with Metroplex? And I was one of the people who pushed with Neil Golub and other members on Schenectady 2000 for the creation of Metroplex. I think Metroplex has been great. I think that Ray Gillen has done a good job of running Metroplex. But the fact of the matter is that we envisioned something very different. Initially, the idea was very simply to make sure that we got the heart of downtown rejuvenated. We wanted to start at Broadway and State Street and work out from there. And so we have the anchor buildings of MVP and what was DOT, and the idea was to fill in between. That's being done. It's being done very well. But the thought was always, on my end, and others on 2000, that we would then go beyond that and go into the neighborhoods. During the campaign, that was one of the things that I pushed for. You have, under the legislation creating Metroplex, the opportunity to go into neighborhoods. You can create pocket parks, you can create some parking. You have to have something that ties into what the legislation permits. I think it's an absolute disgrace that you can go up Broadway Hill and you could see a burned out building, and on each side of it you have businesses. How does that help a business? How does it help the city to have one of its main entrance points have a burned out structure that has had a tarp blowing not so gently in the breeze over the past year? Actually, at this point, it would be 2 years. It makes no sense. Use Metroplex to take those things down because the city doesn't have the ability to take those things down. That's what Metroplex should be doing at this juncture. It's done a great job in downtown. The job is not done, but it's come along tremendously well. Let's see about moving into the other areas and see what can be done. The whole idea of 2000 was to improve our entrance points, to develop some connections among the various parts of this community, because we have incredible assets here. People forget, people who have lived here all their lives, the amazing assets we have, from the Stockade to the G Plot to Central Park to Proctor's to City Hall to Union College and SCC and the river. We have incredible assets. The whole idea of 2000 was to tie those assets together, to have the entrance points be improved, and to develop some real pride in the community. And we've had people who've done it and have done yeoman's work in trying to make this place better. I'd like to get more of the 66,000 people in this community involved. That's one of the things that I was pushing to do during the campaign, and some things I wanted to do had I been elected. But the fact is, we have a great community. We have at the same time incredible financial challenges. You pointed to the newspaper earlier. That 4% is a fraudulent number. 4% is not the tax increase that we really are facing. All they've done is kick the can down the road again, because not included in that 4% increase are the fees that are going up, more importantly, the pension costs that have been amortized over a number of years, the costs of the Taj Mahal, as we call that public works building, that in our judgment should never have been built because we couldn't afford it, and the monies owed to the school district. If you want to factor in the much more realistic number of what it would cost in tax increases if we faced up to the monies we owed on pension and the monies we owed to the school district alone, we'd be looking at a 15% tax increase. It's kicking the can down the road, it's financial charades, and it's just a fraud. When I left the presidency at Union College in 2005, my family and my friends expect me to move back to New York City. I chose to stay here because I love it here. And I love it here because it has in Schenectady, we have in Schenectady these incredible assets that I mentioned a few moments ago. I also chose to stay here because, in my judgment, we have a great school. Not everyone takes advantage of it, and the fact that 40% of the kids in it don't graduate is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. But for those who really want to get a first-rate education, I would argue you can get that education at Schenectady High School better than you can at any suburban school in the area. So I chose to stay here. I could have gone elsewhere, and I stayed because of the assets, which include clearly the school to which my sons attend. And I think we have every right to feel positive about this community. But we also have to be realistic, and we cannot simply sit back and play games and try to hide things from the public. This number of 4%, as I said, is a fraudulent number. It's not the number that we really should be doing. We are engaging in, you choose the term, kicking the can down the road or credit card finance. We are not paying our bills as they are due. We are pushing it off to see how long we can get this thing kicked down the road. You can't run a household that way, and you should not run a city that way.
Sounds like they're just blowing up a bigger bubble.
It's a bubble, it's one that has no good end to it.
Well, with that in mind, I have one more question for you, which is what is in the future for Roger Hull? What do you have planned going forward?
Well, as the old saying goes, life is what happens when you're making your plans. So right now, I'm going to my son's rugby games. He's in his final year of college. I'm working on my foundation for at-risk kids. What I do is create after-school academies on college campuses for at-risk children beginning in 3rd grade. I have 11 programs across the country, from Connecticut to 4 in the Capital District at St. Rose, SEC, Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, and the Sage Colleges. I have 2 in the Midwest, and I have another one in Wyoming. It's a program that I think is making a difference in children's lives, so I'm focusing on that. And I'm continuing to push the Alliance Party because we need competition in the city. If we want to solve our problems, we cannot have one-party rule.
I believe that you're going to continue to be engaged in what's happening here in Schenectady and keeping an eye on some of these issues and speaking out when you see that the numbers don't add up or the storyline that's being given out to the public doesn't make sense, and those kind of things. So that's good to know.
I will always speak out.
Yes. And that's one of the things, as I say, is our main platform here with SAC and SAC TV. And this program is going to be try to get more and more in-depth conversations. If people have these questions, they should contact us here at SAC TV, and we'll be able to, put on additional guests. But really, even in this case, you could reach out to us, and we can get some information to Roger. Maybe have him come back, and we have more issues and more comments to be made. We see a lot of positive things here in Schenectady as well, and the major problem that we have is quite apparent, is that the public does not have enough of the information, and there isn't enough of the other side of the story reaching the people. And we thank you for bringing that to us today.
No, I thank you, Randall, for doing it and bringing this to the people of Schenectady.
Well, in that case, we could thank each other, Roger.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you